Right. I think to a degree some of these things have been knocking around in the questions, but these are just some ideas to, I would have said, do you have any thoughts? But you've been giving me plenty already. So is a flat rate pension in the Isle of Man a good idea? We can think about that. The build-up period that you build up your rights to a pension, CI 65 suggesting 45 years. We've talked about that quite a lot. Should there be a minimum year? I think that this is the question that came up there. We've talked about that. And the state retirement age itself, again, is a debate point, isn't it? The UK is pushing up the retirement age gradually. We, at the moment, are matching that because of the current reciprocal agreement. Should we be out of step with that, I think is to be debated. We could have a go at this with the voting ones if you wish. This is simply asking you, after that section, do you think the idea of creating a system for pensions for the Isle of Man is a good idea? So again, we've got the same scoring approach. 1 is strongly agree, down to 5 being strongly disagree. There you are. The wonders of technology. This is a shorter section, but again, it's probably as challenging. National insurance contributions. Some of you will remember them as the stamps. If you come to my office ever, do feel free to come and say hello. I've got these wonderful framed collections of old Manx national insurance stamps. And I can remember my dad going down to get his stamps, and he actually stuck them in a little piece of cardboard folder. And they're very, very important, of course. All done much more electronically now. But the national insurance contributions are the things flowing in from the working age population. And as the Minister was saying, we have essentially a pay-as-you-go system. So largely, if we ignore the reserve fund that we built up over the years, largely those contributions pay for current pensioners and other national insurance related benefits. So part of the issue, if we have a new Manx pension, is to consider whether or not we change some aspects of the national insurance contribution scheme. Now, the consultants actually suggested that the contribution scheme overall was worth keeping. I think, again, relatively well understood and relatively well working. But if we do change it, those 2 final points there, and we've covered this in a number of ways during the evening, we've got to stay competitive, both domestically for the economy and in terms of across the border. And again, we've got to have a system that's simple and fair for everyone. Here are some of the consultants' suggestions. Just think, so this is the national insurance contributions area. If we were looking towards a unified pension system, should we look at a unified type of contribution? At the moment, employed people pay completely different rates of national insurance to self-employed people.
There is a flat rate Class 2 contribution of £2.70 a week.
That's for self-employed people.
Yeah. Then they pay on profits over £120 a week, up to £784 a week, they pay 7%. And then everything over 784, they pay 1%. Now, the difference for someone who is employed, they don't pay anything until they reach £120 a week. Then they pay 11% from £120 a week up to 784, and then 1% on everything over 784.
How much does the employer pay?
The employer pays 12.8% on everything over £117 a week to infinity.
So, should national insurance help to encourage employment? Can we make it simpler? Can you get a better deal by contributing? Again, we've already started to talk about these things. Should we keep a national insurance system at all? Well, there's an enormous amount of money flows in from national insurance contributions, which goes to very good things. So CI 65 said on balance they would advise us to keep it, but I think that in itself is a discussion point. Should we have employed and self-employed people paying essentially the same contributions on their profits versus their income? should you get a better deal if you're a contributor versus a non-contributor? It's the fairness point. And would a simpler system be better? So, again, we've put together a question here for you to think about. Again, it's not science. We can have a go if you wish, but do you think there are changes to that system based on the sort of things that we've just talked about that it would be worthwhile changing? So again, a relatively similar pattern to the earlier one. I think, you know, a majority of you on this non-scientific way are saying that there may be reasons to change. So I shall hand back to the Minister now and have a rest.
Well, thank you, Malcolm, and give his voice a chance to recover now. Thanks for everything so far. One thing that the state pension was not intended to be when it was originally established was not meant to be the only income in retirement. There was a need for individuals to make other provisions. Now, the UK has brought in a compulsory workplace pensions. Has been successful. There's been a higher uptake than they expected. But it is recognised that for some people, saving for retirement is not a priority. But the sooner we can encourage those to start, the better. What CI65 recommended was that there should be a compulsory scheme, but not a mirror image of the UK scheme. They recognised that it could be a burden on employers and employees. But from an administration point of view, the feeling is the government should do as much of the administration as possible to make it easier. And what CI65 was recommending, that for anybody earning over £9,500 a year, they would be required to contribute 6% of their earnings into a pension scheme, and for those earning more than 60,000, there would be 4%. So it would be a graduated payment scheme. Do you think that people should be compulsorily required to make some contribution towards saving for their retirement, as opposed to be solely dependent on the state pension scheme? Right, so the general consensus is a savings scheme is a good idea. I would suspect, I'm probably putting words in people's mouths, that the strongly disagreed was more to do with the cost element rather than the principle.
In terms of benefits, so we've looked now at state pensions, we've looked at national insurance contributions, and we've looked at the idea of a compulsory workplace savings scheme or pension scheme. And the last big block to look at is the more general benefits system. So this is benefits for working age people. And as the Minister was saying at the beginning, 21 benefits across the piece, and 16 of those are for people of working age. Now, that's not an issue in itself, because if I sort of say to you some of the things that are in this category, bereavement allowance, disability allowances, sickness allowances, unemployment allowances, maternity, paternity, adoption, parenthood. These are all situations where we've said earlier we shouldn't discriminate against people. These are parts of people's lives, and in a caring society there's nothing wrong with contemplating as looking after people in those circumstances. Sorry? Yes, yeah. But I mean, the point I was going to make here is that it's horribly, horribly complex, and that's the main issue for us. So I think if you were a person who needed to come to Treasury's Social Security Division to claim a benefit of any kind, and certainly if you're one of my colleagues working in that division, to run the system, to interact with the system, is absolutely horrendous. So each of these parts of the benefit system has its own rules. Some of them are means tested, some of them are not. Some of the means testing rules are different for one than the means testing rules for others, and on we go. So I think really, rather than you think that this section is going to be about sweeping away benefits, it's not. I think what the consultants have said to us is that if you were starting to go to a certain place, you wouldn't start from here. And that there's a potential way out of this, which again, similar to the idea with having a unified Manx retirement pension, you can contemplate having a unified Manx benefit system, and it could work. So the basic concept that they put to us on this fabulous shopping list is to have a core Manx benefit, whatever you want to call it. Means tested, so that it's properly focused on people in financial need, but then with additions which are to a degree needs tested, so that you might have, if you think about it, the sort of hub and spoke approach, where the hub is the basic benefit, and then there are bits that you can bolt on in the spokes for the different circumstances that people might be in, as we just mentioned. And again, there's a debate whether or not we have means testing or universality around some of these things too. So you might have the basic benefit with additions to match your circumstances. And those additions could be for housing. So at the moment we support people in housing in certain circumstances. That's an appropriate addition. There might be additions for when you have a family. Again, we support people at the moment with different allowances for families. Health and disability allowances for people's different circumstances, all perfectly appropriate. And then you get to a sort of more miscellaneous list of things, which I was mentioning just now. We do give certain allowances for adoption, for carers, etc. And what CI65 has said to us is that you can actually, at least conceptually, think of all of those in the same big hopper with a unifying set of rules and principles. So that again, for people in the community who do need to interact with the Social Security Division, we can make it a much smoother, easier process to negotiate and to understand. So again, I've already covered maybe a few of these points, but we could contemplate a much, much simpler and therefore faster system. We could contemplate having something that would be easy to explain with our usual plain English concept that we've had tonight, and at the moment it's almost impossible to explain the current system. If you have the unified heart of this system with one set of rules, if you need to change the spokes, if you follow my analogy through, you don't need to go through the basic claiming process again because you've already done that. So you get much easier to adapt this to the changing circumstances of a person or their household. It would be far cheaper for us in government to run such a thing because again, one set of rules is easier to do. One basic IT system could run it too. We could configure it according to the consultants, and I think certainly the general view of the government is this, that it could be designed almost to help people towards employment in many circumstances. And I think that's one of the themes that we mentioned earlier, that maybe we should as a government and with your agreement say that an absolute statement is that you will be better off in work than on benefits. So we've covered these things. And there was a question, if you want to do it, which is based on what I've said, and I agree it's a very high level and some of you may think it's ambiguous. Do you think the idea of unifying the benefit system around a single concept is a good idea? And same caveat that you said to me earlier, this is not scientific, but again, of the people who are here and wish to register an opinion, we're getting quite a similar pattern, that the majority of you are saying you can see, at least on the basis of what I've said, some sense in that sort of change.